Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. It's Bill Whittle here, and I am really not up for this one. Might as well just come out and say it. I'm just burned out, tired, and I don't know if there's ever been a time I pushed this button on this show that I just felt like I feel like right now. I just do not feel up for this one, but it's showtime, so here we are. I hope people are doing better than that out there. I don't even really know what's going on. I guess I just tired. And had a good time on Glen Beck today. That was fun. And other than that, it just continues. We getting pretty close to closing out the cruise. Looks like I think that'll be I think next day or two. I had a great time in Idaho last week, watching Nancy Pelosi on the CNN monitor was surreal. That's just surreal. I don't, it's so strange. I mean, the two speeches I gave up there are just most optimistic I've been. I've never felt so good about the country. And Glenn mentioned it in passing just before I went on. He said things are changing. It really is. I just feel like things are just really, strangely enough, like falling apart for them. And I'm not getting enough sleep, I guess. Anyway, so that's about it. Yeah, it's funny how that works. It's just I just don't know. It's like I just feel like their whole world is coming down. And anyway, so mostly just tired, I guess. Let me just zoom this in a little bit. There we go. So if everybody else is doing well, had a real nice time up there. It's just beautiful up there. Got a chance to fly in a King Air in instrument conditions, which was fun. We don't get to do much instrument flying here. I was haven't flown in 3 years, but it was great being in the front seat. Went into actual icing conditions, which I've never seen before. And that's a weird feeling, looking out at the, because night flight both ways, and looking out on the wing and seeing the black rubber strip on the front of the King Air. It's a de-icing boot, and it works by when ice builds up on the leading edge, they inflate it, they pump some air into it, it just expands just enough to crack the ice, and the ice goes flashing back into the windscreen, into the slipstream. And I'd never seen those work before, so it was weird flying along and watching your wings just get whiter and whiter and whiter, and then poof, off they go. Most of the flight out, did an event in Lewiston and flew from Coeur d'Alene to Lewiston and then back. And the flight down to Lewiston, I remember we were 60 seconds into the flight, and I couldn't see out the window, and we didn't really need to. Anyway, the pilot was just a really terrific guy, great, great, great guy. Is the best single pilot IFR guy I've ever seen. He's really, really, really on top of things, and it was fun to be able to sit in the right seat and just be an extra pair of eyes. It was nice to be. It was just very flattering for him to say, "No, you're great. You should do this for a living." It was fun. Um, so yeah, instrument conditions was grand. I loved it, and then the flight back was kind of cool too. Got a chance to stop at a hangar in Lewiston, owned by Gary Peters, and saw I don't know 20 of the nicest airplanes I've ever seen, including a P-51 that was manufactured in 1944 and looked like it had been built this morning. And I used that for kind of nice little close on the speech I did at Lewiston, and then I kind of had a chance to think about that and refine it a bit. So I also did that on Coeur d'Alene the next day. So, well, D.P. Wellman says his fiancée was strong-arm mugged in downtown Disney this morning. Is that in Disneyland, you mean? Or Anaheim? That's pretty sad. Anyway, now here we are. So, take a look at some questions on Facebook and some on the BillWhittle.com thing. 1:30 in the morning in downtown Disney. Yeah, people are constantly asking me to leave this place, and I see just outside. Yeah, well, it's going to hell in a handbasket here, and I feel like one of those reporters. I feel like was it The Year of Living Dangerously? I guess you're like the last Western journalist in. I guess it was Thailand in that movie, but it's like, Cambodia or something. It's like, oh man. Anyway, I saw a bunch of airplanes there. I saw an airplane that had been actually flown by Charles Lindbergh, a biplane, one that was flown by Amelia Earhart. Some of them were like from 1927, I want to say, the oldest ones. And every single one of them looked like they were built that morning. It's very encouraging, especially if you look at what they look like originally. There's a P-38 out there called Glacier Girl. Right now it's flying. It's been restored over a course of years and years. It looks like it was made this morning. But when you see what it looked like after sitting in the glacier underneath the ice for 40 years, it looked like there's nothing left. There's a P-47 out there that apparently sat at the bottom of a lake, 200 feet at the bottom of a lake in Austria for 40 or 50 years, and that's now the best looking restoration flying warboard I've ever seen. It was amazing, just beautiful. I'm still a little concerned here about the comment section. Our friend D.P. Wellman says his wife was punched in the face outside of Disney. That's really, really disturbing. It's all the theme of the speeches I was giving up there is both of them is that I was just looking at I called the Cold War America's longest conflict, but it's actually not. It's the second longest. The longest conflict in American history is the Culture War, which probably started around 1967 and is still ongoing. It's at least 10 years longer than the Cold War. And I just was looking around and I realized I think that the war is won. It's not over, but it's won, and we win. And it's not going to be. I know it's a tough thing to. It sounds tough to justify, and I'm sure I'll get a chance to get it down a little bit when I've had a chance to finish up these Cold War scripts and then get on some firewalls again. But I think all the things that the left had going for it in 1967, 68, control of the media, control of universities, control of Hollywood, control of reasonable politics, all that. I think all of those shiny weapons they had are completely rusted now, and I think they gave it their best shot, and I think they failed. They can't sell their ideas even if they wrap them in Star Wars. So it's going to get worse before it gets better. The war in the Pacific was won in 6 minutes. On June 4th of 1942, and all the real killing came later. And I watched these people get more and more insane. And, it was a pack attack, a group of men. A girl ran off with his feet. See, I'm just kind of catching up with this story as it comes up, so... apparently one of our great friends in Stratosphere Lounge's fiance got hit in the face. And a group of girls, even better. There's, again, I know I'm just in a bad mood. That's all there is to it. I'm tired. But nevertheless, I do believe that that this thing is won, and that it's just a question of the bloodletting, because once somebody realizes that, the Civil War was over at Gettysburg, all the real killing happened after that. The war in Europe was over at Stalingrad, and all the real killing was after that. And certainly the war in the Pacific was won by Midway. And by the end of that battle, the Japanese never once took the initiative again, nor did they ever have any chance to do anything other than surrender in Tokyo. So that's all great. But if my theory is correct and that the war is won, the worst of it's yet to happen. I don't see how they're going to beat Donald Trump. I don't know how they're going to beat them. I mean, they're just too busy beating themselves. Their entire strategy, the Democrats' strategy, has been to make this all about Donald Trump and demonize Donald Trump. And if that theory was working, if their strategy was sound, there would have been big turnouts in both Iowa and New Hampshire. Big turnouts, because the entire Democratic case was, we got to do something to remove this guy. Well, there's subpar turnouts. And even though Bernie looks like he won in New Hampshire, he got considerably less than he thought he would next door to his home state. I don't think Bernie's going to do super well in South Carolina, personally. So I suspect what's going to happen is I think Donald Trump's going to win this handily. And then when he does, if he does, they're going to really lose their mind. And we're going to be faced with... I don't think I've ever seen this before in history. I really can't think of another example where social unrest comes from the top down. I don't know what that looks like. I know what street riots look like, and I know what civil unrest looks like, but I don't know what it looks like if the people who actually turn violent are, D-list movie stars and political organizers, and these so-called liberals who are living these cushy lives. They're dangerous and violent. And the Steve Scalise thing, and this lunatic screaming on campus that he's going to slash every Republican's throat he finds, and the whole impeachment thing, all of it. They're just going to really lose their minds. And this is why I'm so convinced that we won. They know it's over. I wish I'd had the sense to put this sentence quite as pithily as I did on the ride home from the final speech up there last Saturday. But the fact is, they can't sell their ideas to anybody, even if they wrap them in Star Wars. So they're going to just really lose their minds. There are, look, it's like anything else, a bell curve. But the leading edge of their bell curve is a lot more unhinged than ours. I mean, a lot more. So, so they don't have the news media anymore. We all know that that's a joke. Hollywood's a joke. Universities are a joke. And all of their weapons are rusted and dissolving away. And they didn't do it. They didn't turn us into them. All they did was just show people that they'd rather walk away from things they love, like Star Wars or whatever the case may be, rather than swallow these poisonous ideas. So now they're going to have to face the fact that not only are they going to lose, but they're going to lose after they thought they had it won. It's like one of these... Well, it's like Midway, too. I mean, the Japanese just sailed out there, didn't even... they didn't get the reports that they wanted from Pearl Harbor, but that's no problem because the Japanese battle plan said that the American fleet would be in Pearl Harbor when they attacked. So that's what the Japanese battle plan said, so nothing to worry about. They've got what the Japanese called victory disease. They were so sure that they'd won, and they were so overconfident and so shocked when Donald Trump beat them. And now they're flailing, and that means they're off balance. And the more off balance they are, then the more mistakes they make. And impeachment thing's a great one. And then once you start making mistakes, the wheels really come off. It's like I've only seen. I watched it happen to the Gators as one of the worst days of my life, but there's something that happens. It's not real common, but it happens. And it's a special dynamic. Um, and the dynamic is something like this. If you ever seen a game where well, I'll just tell you what I saw. When would this be? 97, 98, somewhere around there. 96, somewhere like that. Um, so, uh, so Florida was playing Florida State, and by the time I got into the fourth quarter, we were up by 28 points, a 4 touchdown lead, and we were all feeling real good. And then Florida State scored, and then we're up 3 touchdowns. 12 minutes left or 10 in the game. We'd been kicking their butts, so I wasn't too worried about it. So then then we got the ball and there was a turnover, so then they scored again. Now we're up by 14 points. And now it's getting to be a little, concerning. And then they kick off and they do the onside kick and recover that. Then they score again, then we're up by 7. And watching this thing was like watching it's like watching somebody being dragged off the edge of a cliff with their fingernails in the dirt, just like trying to hang on. And all of that looseness and all of that ease and grace that we'd had through the first 3 quarters when we were just filled with this confidence just evaporated. And then all we did was just decide we didn't want to lose this game. So we played super conservative and just went up the middle, up the middle, up the middle, punt, up the middle, up the middle, up the middle, punt, up the middle, up the middle, up the middle, punt. And ended up tying. It didn't end up losing, but it sure felt like a loss. Uh, and and the reason I bring that up is because I see the signs of that on the left today. I see the signs of that panic, that kind of panic. And when that kind of thing really hits, things can change very fast, very fast. In the Florida game, I will say to my satisfaction that in the Sugar Bowl national championship game against Florida State, the thing happened in reverse. But there are times when, in a football game, times when you think that the teams went in at halftime and switched jerseys in the locker room, and that all the guys who were just so effortless and scoring at will in the first half suddenly choke, and all the people that couldn't do anything right or suddenly just, they can feel it. They can feel the momentum shift. They know it. And there is that sense of like, whoa, this is historical. Maybe we can pull this off. And the one side gets more and more excited. The other side gets more and more scared. And that's what I think is happening now. Dave Big Booty says that Dems have had a rotten fortnight, but the thing about pendulums is they swing back. Yeah, that's true, Dave. But the problem is that it's not a 14-day pendulum. It's a 60-year pendulum, and it's swung as far to the left as it's going to go, and it's swung real far left. So I feel it. I just absolutely feel it. I feel the wheels coming off of their side, and all of this came to me as a result of watching the reaction to the pop culture, to Star Wars. It's like these progressives chased people out of society, chased them into video games, wouldn't leave them there, followed them into video games, followed them into the pop culture, destroyed those things or tried to, and left a gigantic vacuum where our cultural mythology used to be. Somebody needs to step into that space and fill that need. But I think Trump's going to win, and I got to tell you, I just think that it's going to get really weird. Our friend Dave Big Booty earlier said it's going to be the shortest civil war in American history, and that's true. And sometimes I think, sometimes the only way I can sleep at night is knowing we got the guns and they don't. That's ultimately it. It's ultimately it. When it's said and done, it's like that is the ultimate comfort. And We're not talking about rounding them up and putting them into camps or putting them up against the wall, because we don't do that. But seeing more and more of it from their supporters, especially Bernie supporters, and I see the murderers and the just the raw fascists, these Bernie supporters, and talking about how they're going to, you know, line up Republicans, and just the glee, in their eyes when they talk about sending their enemies to camps, and the glee in their eyes when they talk about taking their opponents and either locking them up forever or chopping their heads off. And I just see these faces, and I just say, I've seen these faces before. This is what the SA looked like. This is what the Cheka looked like. This is what all these totalitarian swine look like. And I'm more and more convinced that it's not the politics turns people into this. It's that the people who have a desire to beat people up and tell them what to do, either one, usually both, end up finding political cover, which is, hey, if you decide to be a progressive, you can dress up in your black mask and your black jacket and your black boots, and you can go kick the living snot out of anybody on the street, and that's okay because they're Nazis. So if I can see what this must have felt like in the 30s, in the 40s, when it happened in the Soviet Union, and when it happened in Germany, and it happened in China in the 50s and 60s. And I can see how all of this must have scared the living daylights out of people. But in this case, it's like they're not going to be pulling us out of houses. And everybody knows it. It's almost like, I swear, it's like, this is actually reassuring too. It's almost like this, we Americans as a people, like the first time in the history of the world ever, have learned, at least to some degree, the lessons of history. Half of us have actually learned the lessons of history and have decided not to repeat them. So for the first time in history, it's like, yeah, this is the time that the political victims have all the guns. And I'm especially proud of the fact that because we have the guns, we're not making the same kind of rhetoric that they're making. If I thought our side was talking about doing this, I'd be a lot more concerned. But I'm not. It's like some historical fluke. The good guys realized you gotta defend yourself, and for the first time we were able to. And I don't want to say the first time in human history. The genius of the founders, and that entire idea of constructing a government that is prepared to deal with tyranny, whether it comes in 10 years or 100 years or 1,000 years, it's just brilliant. They are not going to, this is ultimately it. I mean, sometimes you get a lot of truth from these murderers. Lenin talked about useful idiots, and Mao said that political power comes from the muzzle of a gun. He's right. He's right. And it's just a almost miraculous feeling. It's not like a good feeling. It's just kind of awe-inspiring to think that all of the people doing the threatening are the people that used to be armed, and all the people who are kind and minding their own business are the ones that used to be unarmed. And we've seen how that works out in the past. And I'm not aware of another case in human history, with the possible exception of maybe the Greek hoplites who had their own weapons with them in their own house. Victor Davis Hanson, and know more about that, but I learned quite a bit from him. These farmers were just farmers, and most of them lived outside the city, but they had their armor, they had their panoply of armor, and a lot of it is generations old. Father'd pass it down to son, and it would hang on the wall, and then every 30 years or so, whoever was the strongest male in the family would put this stuff on and go out there and, get into the phalanx and whip the hell out of these people who've been professional warriors their whole lives. And I think that's about the only time I can think of. It's an interesting analogy. I'm going to have to develop that further. I haven't really thought about that before. But the Greek farmers, the Greek hoplites, were essentially militias. They didn't have standing armies. They had farmers, and the farmers all had weapons and armor and hung on their wall over the fire, in a place of honor. And it's like, yeah. And if it started to look like it was getting a little frayed around the leather and stuff, they'd replace it and be ready. So, anyway, yeah. And you can tell a lot about these people too by the projection. It really is a profoundly powerful thing, projection, and it works both ways. We project onto them almost as much as they project onto us. We see things like the Kavanaugh thing, for example, and we look at it and we say, she's clearly lying. Everybody knows she's lying. You look at the impeachment thing, it's like there are no charges here. What Donald Trump is accused of is he's accused of resisting being put up against a wall and being shot, and therefore he deserves to be shot. And we project onto them our own sense of decency and our own sense of honor, and it seems we have a hard time understanding it. It's like this can't be right. It's because we can't imagine doing such a thing to people, but that's all they live for. And I just say, and you think about part of it is projection, and I'll tell you the other part of it is simply preemptive attack. They attacked Trump over Ukraine because it became clear that Hunter Biden was connected to Joe Biden. Joe Biden was connected to the Obamas. Obamas were connected to Clintons. Clintons were connected to the Pelosi's. And the Pelosi's, as it turns out, were connected to Romney. And all of these people have children that are getting, 5-6-figure salaries from this Ukrainian gas company. And there are many, many others out there. So instead of they just have the media, so they just said, all right, well, let's accuse Donald Trump of these things. And I'd better see some indictments, man. I'd better see some indictments. If we win the White House, and especially if we win the White House and the House and the Senate, if we have all three again, and we don't see a list of indictments, then I will be very, very disappointed, to say the least. But in any event, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're not pulling any of us out of our houses. They're not putting any of us up against the wall. They talk about it, but they're not actually doing it. And I notice that these Antifa cowards are pretty good at beating the hell out of unarmed people. Not just unarmed people, but, gay men and things of that nature. But when there are actual veterans there, you just watch their body language, and it's all of a sudden it's kind of like, they stand a little straighter, and it's kind of a, hey, dude, I respect you, dude. It's like, it's, okay.